Very good afternoon to you. What's your take on this historical ruling? Could it have been expected?
Thank you very much, Alicia, and your viewers and listeners and so on. I think it was on the edge. We didn't know which way it will go because the same Supreme Court did, in many ways, make a decision which I thought was wrong when the last elections were challenged because they simply made a decision that the opposition party that lost the elections did not provide sufficient evidence, and the period within which they had to do that was impossible. This time around, I would say that this is a landmark decision for many reasons. One is that it indicates that we are moving, or Kenyans are moving, from a period of presidential democracy to constitutional democracy. Secondly, it does indicate that the Independent Electoral Commission in Kenya needs to be reformed and empowered to be able to contribute to proper electoral democracy. I think those are very, very important because it does seem that the Electoral Commission body in Kenya is compromised and has been compromised over time since 2007 when the chairperson went to announce the results of elections at the presidential palace. And I think that this is going to break that circle where the executive controls the Independent Electoral Commission, they manipulate the system. And then I would like to indicate here that respecting constitutional democracy and the rule of law is important, and that's going to be developed this time around.
Prof, look, we're always hearing about election disputes, particularly in the African continent. What is the number one lesson that should be learned, not just by political parties and politicians, but by the voters themselves?
Well, first of all, that people have been fighting for new constitution to strengthen citizen participation, accountability of government, and also other aspects of democracy. And from that point of view, this ruling is very, very important in landmarking. But putting it in context of Kenya, we are dealing here with a situation where 2007, the Electoral Commission cheated and went to the State House to manipulate the results. Then after that, the next elections which Kenya had were challenged, and they were put aside on the basis of the technology. This time around, technology which is being used is being challenged because it was compromised and was manipulated. So I think that's important. And for me, we are dealing here with a situation of how do you build the constitutional democracy and the rule of law and multi-partyism, and building a government where legitimate in the country, governments of legitimacy in Kenya is a big problem. And I think that the people who challenged the results is no section of the population. We have people from the western side of the country, the Luos, the Luyas, then we have those in the central province, in the Rift Valley, and those in the eastern side, the Kambas, and so on. So we have leaders like Raila Odinga, we have Kilonzo, we have Mudavadi, we have others. So I think that the court or the judiciary, this time around, is trying to play the role it should have played. Because the dictatorship in Kenya was partly a role played by the executive, the judiciary, and parliament.
All right. And Prof, I mean, now that we know that, of course, the credibility of the Kenyan Electoral Commission is at stake, who's going to conduct the next elections that have been stipulated to take place in the next 60 days as the court ruled?
Let me declare an interest here. I'm a Kenyan by ancestry. I'm a South African by really choice, naturalization since 2000. And from that point of view, I'm a Kenyan and I'm a South African. And from those points of view, I think you should judge what I'm going to say on that basis. I would say, from now on, as Kenya tries to move forward and become a united country, it has to really get proper systems in place. The Independent Electoral Commission there is not independent. It has proven that it is not independent. Before the new constitution and after. The people fought for the new constitution, their values, principles, what ought to be done, but the current electoral management body in the country is operating under the old paradigm. That needs to be changed. And I think that Kenyans and Africans need to come out and say we want to really make sure that even in issues of election monitoring, the monitorers ought to be there a few months before the elections. They need to be there during the elections. Absolutely. They need to be there after the elections.
Absolutely.
What we have is a farce where you have the so-called electoral management bodies being headed by former politicians, and they go there and they say, oh, we went to polling stations, this was fine. There was no violence. Therefore, it was free and fair. That is not the case. This time we're dealing in Kenya, and the last time, with technical issues. What gadgets are we using in technology? Are people trained enough to be able to monitor it? Are they monitoring and applying them? And if there's a hitch, are they able to deal with that? The current president, the opposition leader, Raila Odinga, is an engineer. And he was able to pinpoint where the problem really was. And the court in Kenya has really confirmed that what they were arguing about was true.
Okay, Prof.
But within that group of the opposition party, we have a lot of lawyers of distinction. Some of them whom I taught at the University of Nairobi, like Watangula. Then there are others who, like Kalonzo Musyoka, and so on. And then we have Mudavadi. So Kenya may divide, as former President Thabo Mbeki made a statement in the media the other day to say that Kenya may split into pieces if this is not properly addressed.
Thank you, Prof. We have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you so much for your sound analysis. As always, that was Professor Shadrack Gutto on the line to us, sharing his wise insight on the Supreme Court's ruling in Kenya to nullify the recent polls.